The winter wind cut through her thin shawl, as if it wanted to freeze her heart as well. Emily Parker walked between her father and the town elder, their hands gripping her arms so hard that bruises were already forming. Snow covered the ground like a deep white ocean, and each slow step felt like she was walking further away from the world she knew. Her father had called her a burden, a curse, a mouth he could no longer feed. Today he proved it. He was giving her away. They marched her toward the mountains, to a place where maps ended and fear began. People whispered about the man who lived there. They said he lived alone in a cabin built from the forest itself, a man who spoke to no one and trusted nothing, a man the town feared yet wanted favors from, a man they believed could erase debts and settle old sins. Inside that lonely cabin, the mountain man named John Reed watched them approach through his small, dirty window. He recognized trouble when he saw it. He had agreed to clear an old debt after receiving a short note from town weeks ago, but he never expected the payment to be a girl. Her hair was tangled, her cheeks pale, and her eyes looked lost. John opened the cabin door. The cold air rushed inside, full of snow and silence. He stood tall, his shoulders broad from years of hard living. His beard was mostly gray, his face lined, and his blue eyes looked as cold as the frozen lake nearby. Her father tossed a small bag of coins into the snow at John's feet. It made a dull sound as it landed, but John didn't bend to pick it up. His eyes stayed on the girl. Thick rope marks circled her wrists, raw and bleeding. A small scar showed near her hairline, a pale reminder of past pain. John gave a short nod. The trade was done. Without a word, her father and the elder turned and walked away, leaving Emily standing in the snow. They didn't look back. They didn't say goodbye. They left her like someone leaves unwanted trash on a doorstep. When they were gone, John stepped aside, and she entered the cabin. Silence filled the small space. The smell of burning wood, animal fur, and cold air wrapped around her. Emily stood still, her head lowered, waiting for more cruelty, waiting for orders, waiting for the next chapter of pain. But John said nothing. He walked past her, took out a long knife from the wall, and knelt in front of her. Emily froze with fear, thinking he was about to hurt her. She held her breath. Instead, he cut the ropes from her wrists. The last part of the rope fell to the ground, and she pulled her hands back, holding them to her chest. The skin was rubbed raw. She tried not to cry, but her throat ached with the effort. John wiped the knife and put it away. He pointed his chin toward the fire. A pot boiled over it, and the smell of warm stew filled the air. It smelled so good that her stomach twisted with hunger. It had been days since she had eaten a real meal. He filled a wooden bowl with stew, placed it on the table, and set a spoon beside it. Then he turned away, giving her space, as if feeding her did not matter at all. Emily moved toward the table like a starving animal. The first spoonful burned her tongue, but the warmth felt like life returning to her body. She ate slowly, afraid the food might disappear if she blinked. It was simple stew, but to her, it felt like a gift. When she finished, she noticed a soft wolf pelt waiting near the fire. She wrapped it around herself and sat close to the flames. For the first time in a long time, her body didn't shake from cold. John worked quietly in the corner, sorting animal pelts. He said nothing, and she did not dare speak. He didn't treat her kindly, but he didn't treat her cruelly either. She didn't know which one she feared more. The days slowly passed, each one silent and cold. John left early every morning to hunt or check his traps, always leaving firewood for her inside the door. She kept the fire alive. It was her only task. The fire was the heart of the cabin, and without it, the cold would steal life from them both. In the evenings, John returned with rabbits, birds, or sometimes nothing. He cooked, she ate, and silence stayed between them. Emily watched him. She noticed the scars on his hands, the tired look in his eyes, and the way he stared into the fire as if he was seeing something far away, something painful. One night, a terrible wind howled outside like a cry from the mountains. Emily shook under her wolf pelt. The cold still slipped into her bones. John looked at her for a long moment. Then he stood, took a heavy bearskin from the wall, and placed it around her shoulders. "You're cold," he said. His voice was deep and rough, as if he had not used it in a long time. Those 2 words were the first he had spoken to her. They were simple, but they warmed her more than the fire. For the first time since arriving, Emily slept without fear. A small change had begun, not outside in the snow, but inside the cabin. Inside their hearts. Spring did not come to the mountains yet, but something warm began to grow inside the small cabin. It started with small things. One morning, Emily woke to find a small wooden carving beside her blanket. It was a tiny bird, wings slightly open, as if it was learning to fly. The carving was rough, but made with care. She held it gently in her palm. It was the first thing anyone had given her in a long time that wasn't meant to hurt her. She kept it hidden in the pocket of her dress like a treasure. Emily slowly began to find her place in the cabin. She found an old needle and thread inside a dusty box and began sewing the torn sleeve on John's shirt. The first stitches were uneven, but she kept trying. She swept the floor using a bunch of tied twigs, clearing dust that had been there for years. She warmed water and washed the bowls and spoons. She even hummed a soft tune she remembered from childhood. Her mother used to sing it when life felt gentler. Whenever John returned from the woods and saw these small changes, something in his hard face shifted. He never said thank you, but his eyes stayed on her a little longer. The space between them began to feel less cold, but the past never stays quiet for long. One night, Emily woke up from a nightmare, her heart racing. She saw the town again in her dream. The preacher yelling, her brother holding the hot iron, the burning pain. She sat up, breathing fast, tears running down her face. Across the cabin, John sat up too. He didn't come to her. He didn't speak. He simply took his rifle into his lap and began to clean it. His presence was steady and strong, like a guard protecting a fortress. He stayed awake until her crying stopped and she fell back to sleep. The next morning, while she placed wood in the fire, her shawl slipped off her shoulder. The dancing flames lit the old scar from the branding, the ugly mark the preacher burned into her skin as punishment. John saw it. His hand tightened around the knife he was sharpening. His jaw clenched. His eyes lifted to hers, and for the first time, his look was not cold. He understood pain. She saw it in his eyes. He had scars too, even if not on his skin. He didn't say a word, but something changed. It felt like a door inside him opened, even if just a little. Days passed. The snow began to thin, showing dark dirt underneath. One afternoon, a man on horseback arrived. Tom Baker, a trapper who traveled through many mountain paths, stopped by for warmth and news. John gave him coffee. Emily stayed near the fire, quiet and nervous. Tom glanced at her with worry. "Trouble in the valley," he said. "Bad trouble." John's eyes narrowed. "What kind?" Tom leaned closer and lowered his voice. "Your brother, miss. He's been stirring up the town. The well water went bad last week. Folks are blaming you. Preacher says your sinful spirit cursed it. He's telling everyone you ran into the mountains to spread evil." Emily felt her stomach twist. Tom's voice dropped more. "They are forming a group to come after you, to drag you back and burn the sin out." John asked questions about how many men, who was leading them, and if they had guns. His voice stayed calm, but Emily saw the storm rising behind his eyes. After Tom left, the cabin changed. John's movements became sharp and focused. He locked the door with a heavy iron bar. He boarded most windows, leaving just a small slit to look through. He pulled an old rifle from under the floorboards, checking its condition. He laid bullets, knives, and a small axe on the table. Emily stood still, watching. The quiet hunter she had known was gone. Now he was a man preparing for a fight he had waited years for. He placed a long skinning knife in Emily's hand. "You stay down, away from the door. No matter what you hear," he said. Emily nodded. But she was not the scared girl who arrived here. Not anymore. That evening, the first torchlight flickered through the trees. Voices echoed. Angry voices. The mob was coming. Emily's heart pounded, but her fear turned into something stronger. Determination. She would not let them take her. She would not lose the small piece she had found. While John stood near the front, guarding the door, Emily slipped through the small back opening meant for scraps. The night air was cold, but her steps were silent. She moved behind the woodshed. The large pile of firewood John stored for winter sat stacked high. Emily pushed with all her strength. The pile fell, crashing loudly. Logs rolled across the slope, crashing into bushes and branches. The sound tore through the night like thunder. The mob panicked, thinking it was an attack. Shouts turned to fear. Their line broke. Emily hurried back into the cabin, just as the preacher and her brother reached the clearing. Firelight showed their angry faces, full of hatred. The preacher pointed toward the door and shouted, "Witch! She must face God's judgment!" John opened the door and stepped outside. He held no weapon. His hands were empty. He stood tall. "There's no witch here," John said. "Only a girl you all abused." Her brother screamed, "She is marked by sin!" John took one step forward. "You want to talk about sin? Then hear mine." What he said next froze every voice in that clearing. "Wait, before we move on. What do you think about the story so far? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm really curious to know." John's voice was steady, but every word carried the weight of years of pain. "You called my wife cursed when fever took hold of her," he said. "You prayed instead of sending the doctor. You locked your doors while I begged for help. My little girl burned with fever in my arms, and none of you came. You watched from your windows while I buried them both." The mob that once shouted with confidence now stood frozen. Some lowered their torches. Some looked at the ground in shame. The preacher swallowed, but his voice shook with anger. "You blame us for God's will?" he said. John's eyes turned sharp. "No, I blame you for cruelty. You used God as a shield to hide your cold hearts." Silence spread. The mountain wind whistled through the trees, the only sound until Emily stepped out of the cabin to stand beside John. She didn't hide behind him. She stood shoulder to shoulder. Slowly, Emily pulled her dress collar aside, showing the scar of the branding. Gasps rose from the crowd. "This was not God's mark," she said. "This was my brother's." Her brother stiffened, but she kept speaking. "I was branded because I saw him steal from the church money box. He feared I would tell. He did this to me, and the preacher blessed it." Her voice didn't shake. She had carried pain long enough. Tonight, she returned it. The preacher's face turned red. Her brother stepped forward, but before he could speak, more figures entered the clearing. Tom Baker returned, and beside him were two men on horseback. One of them wore a dark coat with a silver badge. The circuit judge. He was known for fairness and for carrying the law wherever he traveled. Tom had ridden for him the moment he left the cabin. The judge dismounted, his voice firm. "Enough." He listened to both sides. He questioned the preacher and Emily's brother. Lies fell apart under his sharp questions, and truth stood clear. At the end, the judge spoke with authority. "This girl is not guilty of any sin. The only sin here is the cruelty done to her." He ordered the preacher's removal from his post and placed Emily's brother under arrest for assault and abuse. The mob shrank back. No longer an army, just frightened townspeople who had followed the loudest voice. They scattered into the forest, torches dimming one by one. When the clearing was empty and only the snow and the stars remained, John and Emily walked back inside the cabin. It felt different now, lighter, safe. John added wood to the fire. Emily washed her face and hands in a basin. When she turned, she saw John holding the small wooden bird, the carving he had made for her. His thumb brushed over its wings as if it carried memories. He looked at her with a gentle expression she had never seen before. "The winter is long," he said softly. Spring is a long way off. It wasn't about the weather. It was an invitation, a choice, a hope. Emily's eyes warmed with tears. "I'll stay," she whispered. He nodded, accepting her words with a quiet breath of relief. He reached into a small leather pouch and pulled out a thin silver ring. It was worn with age. Emily realized it was his wife's ring. He didn't place it on her finger. Instead, he set it on the mantel beside the little wooden bird she had placed there earlier. Not a replacement, not a demand, just a place for both their pasts to rest side by side. Then he stepped close to her. With gentle hands, he lifted a small section of her long, dark hair. From his wrist, he removed a thin leather cord, the one he always wore, and slowly braided it into her hair. His touch was careful, honest, a silent promise. Not ownership, not debt, a bond. Time passed. The snow melted, running down the mountains in silver streams. Spring arrived with green fields. Emily planted a small garden. John built a new room for the cabin, with windows facing the sunrise. She baked bread in their stone oven. He taught her how to read the forest, tracks, weather, stars. Wolves that once kept their distance now watched her with calm eyes, as if accepting her as part of John's world. They rarely spoke of the past. They didn't need to. Pain had brought them together, but love built something new between them. A life made not of fear, but of quiet mornings and warm evenings, of shared work and shared peace. One summer evening, as the sun dipped behind the pines, Emily looked at John sitting on the porch whittling another small bird. She felt safe. She felt home. She felt loved. Their hearts, once broken by the world, had healed in the mountains. Together,